Hello and welcome to the World Tech Insider. I'm today's host, Peter Warren. Great to be with you. And I've got a very special guest today, Matthew Vandermeer from Leading Teams. So I should make a quick disclosure up front. Matt and I go a long way back. We used to play rugby together, but that's a long time ago, Matt, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a long time ago.
When our bodies were a bit more agile and capable, but maybe our brains weren't as wide. So this will hopefully be more of an intelligent chat than we would have had all those years ago. But it's great to have you on the podcast, Matt. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, mate. It's good to see you. So am I calling you Warnie or are you still Peter Warren?
You can call me Warnie. I think a lot of people think you should call me Warnie, so that's okay. I'll call you Vanders, and that'll be keep it nice and familiar. But Matt, you've obviously had a long history in the industry. Probably you started in the industry similar time to me, actually, a long time ago in Queensland. But do you just want to, for those that don't know you, just talk about your background and what brought you to Leading Teams?
Yeah, sure. So started life in the financial planning industry, client service paraplanner back at the end of 1997. So I did a couple of advice roles for a little bit. Then I joined one of the big banks, the BDM, for a few years. And then I joined NAB MLC in 2005. And I was there for about 17 years. Lots of different roles, product BDM, insurance, platform investment. Moved to Melbourne for a bit. I had a spell in Melbourne, which is actually where I first came across Leading Teams, which is I could talk about in a minute. Moved back to Queensland into my first leadership role. So I was responsible for the NAB MLC, and we just acquired Aviva. So it was a pretty big suite of people and a big suite of products there for a little while. Did that for a few years and then moved into licensee. So I ran the NAB MLC licensees up in Queensland for about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah,
2019
so had even long. Yeah, even longer than me in the industry. Even longer than me in the industry. I started in 2000. So there you go.
There you go. Only a few years, but yeah. 2019 got made redundant. Did it, which was after 17 years is not a bad way to go. Did a couple of secondments because there was this thing floating around the air a little bit around that time. So, and then I joined Leading Teams. It just come up to 4 years ago.
And Matt, you've probably seen as much change as anyone in the industry. I mean, I guess now that you're not inside the industry necessarily anymore as an operator, but you're certainly active in the industry. Can you just give us a barometer check on where you think the industry is actually at? Because it's a pretty change fatigue industry is my current observation at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate. There's been a lot of stuff. I reckon from the outside looking in, it's still in good shape. So my observation is there's still a lot of people that want and need advice. There's less people giving advice. There's operators who have just decided to opt out. So for those that are in the business of giving advice, I reckon you're in good shape. You've got opportunity in front of you. I mean, and rightly so, you have to do things differently. You can't just keep doing things the way you've already done it, the way you've always done it. But I think if you're in business now and you've got your qualifications and you've invested in the way you do things, I reckon you're set up for a good period of success. That's my view.
Yeah, I think the fundamentals are outstanding, to be honest. If you survive this far, and I guess now with the way the world is, and this is it's a technology podcast, obviously, but there's tools that are now available to business owners and operators that weren't available 20 years ago. I mean,
absolutely.
When we started the industry, the internet wasn't a thing, No,
correct. That's right.
And so that probably is a big thing we're going to talk about today is how do winning businesses actually embrace chaotic changing environments and be successful. And so just bring us a bit into the world of Leading Teams. So a lot of people would have heard of you and probably seen some of your business partners talk at various events and that. But just talk us about Leading Teams, its mission, how it goes about doing what it does.
Yep. So Leading Teams, this is our 25th year. So our purpose is to help teams and individuals become high performing. Probably warning why most people know us is because of our link to footy. Right, which is where I first came across Leading Teams. I was driving out to an appointment out in the Gippsland region of Victoria. When I moved to Victoria as a Queenslander, my teammate said to me, "You should go to the Gippsland. It's awesome. We'll give you that region." So they gave me some lovely parts of the world, and I'm driving out there in my Honda, listened to the radio because it was before podcast, and it was I think it must have been Geelong. Geelong had just won their premiership and leading teams were at Geelong. And the ABC host interviewed the leading team's founder, Ray McLean. He was talking to Ray about, what do you guys do? What do you actually do when you're at a footy club? And he talked about things like a team trademark. He talked about things like getting a team to reflect on how do you want to be described? What do you want your opponents to say about you? What do you want your competitors to say? What do you want your members to say? And it really sort of resonated with me. It was really simple, but it really kind of sharpened me up. I'm a big reader. I'm pretty sure I rolled into there was a Dimmicks on Collins Street. I bought the book, the leading team's book. And I reckon maybe a year or so after that, I saw Paul Roos, who was coach of Sydney, a legendary footy coach. He talked at the AFA conference at the Gold Coast. So kind of from them, I became a bit of a fanboy in leading teams. And I kind of tried to implement it myself. So it's basically, we're a leadership and culture business. We help teams, kind of like I said, mate, imagine I said to you right now, if you had to describe your business, how would you describe it? Right? And you might say we're friendly, we're polite, we're disconnected, we're siloed, we're whatever words you might use. And then you might also say, well, how do you want to be described? We want to be aligned, we want to be committed, we want to be trusted. We kind of help with that gap, right? There's some stuff going on that stops teams being the team they want to be. Sometimes it's tech stack, sometimes it's their CRM, sometimes it's their file loading software. But in my experience, mate, it's more often than not, it's the human interaction. It's the stuff going on between humans that gets in the way. Does that kind of give you a sense of leading teams?
It does, mate. And I'll let you in on a little secret. We get, we've got a lot of wonderful clients in our business. As you can imagine, everyone wants to help with their technology, but there's an awful lot that we meet who we don't work with. And the primary reason being is that it becomes really apparent to us early in the conversation that's not a tech issue. Now, it does require a bit of instinct on our part to sort of identify some red flags, as we would call it, about, hey, no amount of tech stack solutioning is going to solve some of these challenges that you've got. But there is sometimes a temptation for businesses to point their fingers at, let's call them spot fires, rather than the hard question about culture.
Yep.
Do you see that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, mate. So first of all, I think it's easy to justify spending money on what we call mechanics, right? So in any team, there's two important parts. There's the mechanics. So that's KPIs, strategic plans, operating skills. That's where talent and competence sits, right? If you want to be a good advice business, you have to give advice well, right? If you want to be a good footy team, you've got to play footy well. So that's where the ability to do the job is. The other thing that in any team is what we call the dynamics. Dynamics is around culture and behavior, right? So it's about how you do things. Now, in my observation, it's really easy to justify our spend in mechanics. We just need more clients. We just need better pricing. We just need a better tech stack. A lot of footy team, we just need someone who can kick more goals or run faster, right? That'll help us win the flag. But make no mistake, I know I'm talking about leadership and culture, but mechanics are critically important, right? You have to do that stuff well, but it's not the only thing. And I reckon the reason why it's easy to justify to yourself of why tech, pricing, any of those mechanics is it's kind of easy to measure, right? You can get scorecards on them. You can measure, they're easy to measure. Culture and behavior is a bit harder.
Let's talk about how can you get a sense of culture? This is great for me because I've avoided the temptation to talk about sport in this podcast, but I can now because you're here. But we've just the last couple of weekends seen two pretty unbelievable premierships being won by two teams, one of whom was the Brisbane Lions that have gone through I'd say a sustained period of cultural change. Chris Fagan was brought in a number of years ago. And more recently, the Brisbane Broncos, who were kind of nowhere not so long ago, have a new coach installed and within 12 months have won the premiership.
Yep.
What are the things that you think are the recipes for success that can either bring about sustained change periods leading to success or even really quick things that have happened like at the Broncos? What's the secret sauce?
Few elements there, right? So first of all, it starts with the leaders, right? And leadership is about followership. So to be a leader, all you need is followers. There's lots of things leaders should do, but the one thing you need to be as a leader is to have followers. If the way you show up, like use footy, if the way you turn up at training, if you're there early, boots on, ready to go, or you're arriving when training starts, that'll set the tone. And if you're one of your key centers of influence is doing that, then the junior players come in and they see that and they go, well, that's the way we do things here, right? So leaders and the role of leaders is critically important. The other recipe is we've got to be clear about what it is we're trying to achieve. Like, why are we here? So we did some work with the Brisbane Lions women's team. I love their purpose. So that we call it a common purpose and call it whatever you like, but it's basically why do we exist? And the Brisbane Lions women's team, they want to inspire the next generation of female athletes, right? So winning's going to help with that, but it's not the only thing, right? I work with the wheelchair AFL team up here in Queensland, the Queensland wheelchair team, and they want to inspire people to get up and have a crack, not necessarily win, right? So it's, an advice, so having some reason of why you do it. Then you need to focus on mechanics and dynamics, right? And the elements of dynamics. So let's get into what makes a culture. There's probably 3 things you need to do. First of all, you need to have some pretty clear expectations of the way we do things around here. So this should be codified. We should talk about it. We should understand what it is. We call it an agreed behavioural framework. The most important word there is agreed. So it becomes our behaviours that we've decided to do, right? This is the way we've decided to do things here. This is also where the team trademark comes in. So we were at the Sydney Swans at 2003 when they came up with their trademark of the Bloods culture, right? And they have 3 words that they want to be described as. They want to be described as hard, relentless, and disciplined, right? So that sort of goes into, and there's some behaviours that underpin that, right? But you want to be clear about the expectations we have about us as a team, right? That's part 1. Part 2 is you can have all the behaviours and expectations of the world, but if you're going to talk to someone about that, you need to have an environment of trust and respect, right? So I remember working with a big advice business. They changed leaders. So the Queensland state manager had to go and look after Tasmania. Now, down in Tasmania, they basically had a rule where when they had their team meeting, so it was only once a week, you didn't bring you weren't supposed to be on your phone, right? You had your phone on the table, you weren't supposed to touch it. Now, so this brand new leader had come down there, and I think he was selling a house or something reasonably important. It was important without being urgent. And he got on his phone. Now, the most junior person in the team said to him, hey, mate, sorry, we don't get on our phones in the meeting, right? So there had to be something going on there, right? For a junior person to say to their brand new leader, hey, mate, that's not the way we do things here. So what has to be there is some sort of relationship, or what we say is an environment of trust and respect, right? So if we have an environment of trust and respect, Stephen Covey talks about, you've got trust and respect when you can say the wrong thing, but it gets taken the right way.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
You don't have to explain yourself away all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got that relationship. You've got some expectations, right? If you've got those things, and you can have what we call a genuine conversation. Genuine conversations are lots of things. It's also where feedback sits. So it's right where you and I can say, well, we trust each other. I know you care about me and my performance, and I care about you and your performance, and I care about us making this team better. We've agreed on how we're going to do things around here. So we're empowered to talk about that. So we are going to talk to each other about that performance. So if you've got those elements, that's the sort of culture you should have, and that should help drive your mechanics.
How do you find, because I think sometimes being in rooms when sporting analogies have been used, and certain people in the business that you can see the eyes glaze over, or they roll the eyes, or there's sometimes historically a gender dynamic at play there where people don't want footy stories, although I think that's evolving a little bit. But in a footy team, so when we played rugby together, Matt, our objective was pretty clear: have fun, and ideally win a premiership.
We happen to win a few along the way. That's right. Yes.
And exactly. And so that was great, and we sort of managed to do both. A lot of the first, and a little bit of the second. But everyone's kind of clear on a team objective in a sporting team in the sense that it's about the scoreboard, it's about how we go about it. And then obviously there's a goal at the end, which is almost an annual goal to achieve. But in a business, it can be different because different people in the business maybe don't feel those annual goals in the sense, they don't necessarily have the same targets or the same, they're not shareholders. So they're sort of going, well, how do I fit in this? How do you sort of build that, I guess, that connection and alignment to a goal that everyone can buy into, not just a business owner?
Yeah, it's a good point. A couple of things there. The first thing I'd say, the question to reflect on is, do you have to be an owner to be invested? Right? So if you think back over the journey, and there's people we've seen in this industry who are as invested as anyone else, but they're not owners, right? So that's not a fluke. You can create that. But getting back to your question, so the purpose is around why we have, and this is where, so we do a bit of work, mate, making sure people understand it's not, when we talk purpose, it's not necessarily that big organizational purpose. It's more about, if we are deciding to operate as a team, why? What's in it for us? What's in it? Let's use an advice sense. What's in it for our clients? What's in it for the rest of the industry? What's in it for our community? What's in it for our staff if we want to operate as a team? Because in advice, I could just go off, find my own clients, build my own book, run my own business that way. So if we're going to come together as a team, let's talk about the why. Winning premierships can be a goal, but it may not be the why. Billy Slater talked about, so Queensland, State of Origin coach, Billy Slater, was a couple of years ago. He was in a post-game press conference. He talked about the why for Queensland, and it wasn't to smash New South Wales. It was to represent our people, right? We exist. So we've chosen to play the way we play and put the team together the way we do because we want to represent our people. By the way, if we happen to win along the way, we're going to represent them better. But so we just make sure we have that conversation about, it's almost like, what would you lose? If we stop being a team, what would our client base lose? What would our people lose? What would the industry lose? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think, this is always such a challenge in business because sometimes I think so many of the business planning conversations I've sat through have been very much about profit and performance. And I sort of look across the room, even as a neutral observer sometimes, and go, gee, this isn't resonating with the people in the room because that doesn't matter to their world.
Yeah.
But obviously,
yeah.
but often job security is important to people. So
Absolutely.
they want to know the business is profitable, so their job is secure. Yeah. That's different, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about purpose, right? You're like, sorry, go.
I was going to say, do you find business owners are effective at communicating that? Or is that a special skill in itself?
It's a good question. I think it's very varied, mate. Some people, and I think this is something you really be careful of, is making assumptions, right? Isn't it just common sense? Why do I have to tell them? Like, there's a bit of that comes out, and I don't think that's a recipe for success. Like, I just think wherever possible, feedback or a conversation, wherever possible, shouldn't be a surprise. So if you used our rugby team as an example, if someone was taking it too seriously or wanted to train 5 nights a week or wanted to do that, we talked to them about it because it was pretty clear. If you want to come and play for us, we're training 1 night a week. And if you want to play for sheep stations, we're not the team for you. Come play for a real team, right? It wasn't a surprise to anyone. And if people missed games because they were on holidays or they had work on, like, well, I don't know about you, but I wasn't getting myself tied up in knots about it, saying, why isn't Warnie here? He should be training. We were like, that's just the team we are, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly didn't mean we didn't have high performers. I think that club attracted a lot of people who were actually very good rugby players.
Yes.
Maybe not you and I, but certainly that's some other talented kids who were there and who didn't want the pressure. That was part of it, right? For some people, they got sick of the pressure of the higher grade footy and they just wanted to play for fun. But I think this element of this alignment piece and culture, like it is spoken about a lot. And in fact, I listened with interest to some of the post game interviews of some of the grand finals results over the last 2 weekends. A number of players mentioned culture. So what do you when a player sort of says, or a team member in your business says, oh, look, I'm here for the culture. What do you think they're saying? Like, do you think they all have a different interpretation of what culture is and that's what makes it successful?
Yes, mate. So this is a funny thing. I reckon culture's almost become a bit of a corporate buzzword, right? You hear it a lot. And it also, it almost feels like culture's got a seat at the table. Like we can blame culture. And cast your mind back to our mate, the Commissioner Hayne, right? In the Royal Commission, he talked about, he blamed the culture of I think it sounds like the sales culture of the banks or the lack of surveillance culture at ASIC, right? It's almost like, well, it's culture's fault. It's not my fault. It's not mine. It's culture. Culture's to blame for it, right? It also gets credited, as you saw, you see Harris Andrews saying it's the culture, right? So I like to be clear on what we mean by culture, because it's not the ping pong table at work or the bring your dog to work day or not even really hybrid working. When we talk to teams about culture, what we mean, it's the attitudes and behaviors that people unconsciously adopt to fit in with the expectations of people around them. Right? I'll say that again. It's the attitudes and behaviors that people unconsciously adopt to fit in with the expectations of people around them. All right? So if you have your team meeting, is it cameras on or cameras off? Is it microphones on or microphones off? Are you doing it when you're walking outside? And if I'm a new person to your team and I dial into my first team meeting, what am I seeing? Oh, everyone's out walking. Everyone's out walking. This is a walking meeting. Oh, well, what do you reckon I do next time? I'm out walking. All right. Or I remember one time I was doing some work at a big tech company down in the valley in Brisbane, and I got there about 1:30. I'm kicking off at 2:00. People are dribbling in sort of in that half an hour period, and everyone brought their laptops. They're all working away on their laptops until I started, right? Every single person brought their laptop. Again, you join that team, first meeting, you see everyone with your laptops. What do? Go and get your laptop. So you can't be cultureless. Culture can't exist in a vacuum. Your team has a culture. It's about, and this is the work that we help teams with, working out is the culture that you've already got. Is it helping get you where you want to go or not? Is it helping or is it holding you back? And we help you sort of structure that up. So that's what I mean by culture. So when Harris Andrews from the Lions talks about culture, he's talking about the way we do things around here. So we help each other or not. Like when Joe Danaher was missing goals, are they abusing him or are they going and saying, don't worry, mate, you got him next time? Like, they're just choices you make. Culture helps you decide what choices I'm going to make.
Who starts that process? Because there would be potentially some people listening to this who maybe have a smaller business or who are new in a business and they maybe can't put their finger on the culture. They might feel it's a bit vanilla, don't know. We don't have one yet. I don't know. How does culture manifest? How does it start?
Well, yeah, you can't. So as I said, you can't be cultureless, right? So one of my teammates, he talks about, he's got different friends groups. And one of his group of friends, they swear more than others when they catch up. It's not like they got around and said, righto, fellas, when we catch up, let's use more farm language. It just kind of happened, right? So any leader of any business, listen to this, you've got a culture, right? You've got a culture. The way to sort of start auditing your culture, this is what we do with teams. We did with the Lions back in 2017. There's kind of 3 questions you can ask yourself is what words would you use to describe our business, our team, our culture right now? Just get a whole stack of words. How would you like to be described in an ideal world? How would you like to be described? Those words. And then the 3rd question is, what are the counterproductive behaviors that we accept or tolerate that's holding us back from being high performing? All right. So this is the stuff that just happens in your team that you don't do anything about. So let's use an advice example. Your paraplanner, your client service person prepares some documents and it's not quite right. What do? Do you just go, you know what? It's just going to be quicker for me to fix it. Or do I send it back so they can fix it and they can learn for next time? That's just a choice you make, right? Yeah. If you constantly think about it, if you're a principal of an advice firm and you constantly fix your client service people or your paraplanners' work, what might happen? They may never get better. They may
become a paraplanner.
Yeah, correct. A whole heap of different things might come out of it, right? So, but to answer your question, where does culture start? Who do you reckon has the biggest influence of the culture of the Brisbane Lions?
So I part of me thought it was going to be Chris Fagan.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel like it because the Lions existed before Chris Fagan.
Sure. But how are they going before Chris Fagan?
Not well.
Yeah.
Not very well.
So the leader, principal of a school, the CEO of a firm, the head coach, they set the tone. They have a big impact on the culture. Doesn't mean they're it. right? Remember, we talked about leadership's about influence and about if you have followers. So you could have a situation where the coach has very low influence, but normally they're not the ones that, necessarily have sustained success. Normally you need all the leaders, the key centers of influence, the people with all the influence, drive the culture. So did you ever watch The Redeem Team on Netflix?
I did.
Yeah, The Redeem Team.
It was excellent.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you remember basically the Redeem Team is about the US basketball team who was full of NBA superstars. And correct me if I'm wrong, mate, but like in the Athens Olympics, they didn't even get bronze. And so they wanted to redeem themselves 2012, I guess it was, 2008.
Yeah.
It was around then. So this is a documentary that charts that, right? Now, I don't know if you remember, there's one scene when they're all overseas and all the players go out and have a few drinks and have a good time. They're coming back to the hotel at about 4 a.m., right? And someone's sitting in the foyer tying up his laces, Kobe Bryant, right? And they say to him, Kobe, where are you going? I'm going to training. I'm going to practice, right? That would be an example of leadership. That would be an example of modeling the behavior. That had a big influence on the rest of that club, on the rest of that team, sorry. Because the next time round, they weren't out, next night they weren't out on the drink. They were training. So culture starts with the influences in your business. Now, it should be the CEO. So you should have a big influence on the culture at your joint. And also what you start measuring. And also what gets rewarded and challenged. So 3 words that are really important to culture are the words model, reward, and challenge. So what behavior are you modeling? What really gets rewarded? And what behavior gets challenged? Right? If you think about the Royal Commission, none of the industry players had a purpose or a reason for being was to put shareholder needs in front of the client. Right? No one said that's what we're going to do, but what was happening, shareholder needs were being put in front of the client. And my view of being in it, and you were in it as well, was what was really getting rewarded was revenue, sales, finding money, right? That was the business. That was what was really getting rewarded. What wasn't getting challenged was how, why, how'd you get there? Who'd you find? What, that was, think about it. You'd come to your team meetings or you'd meet with your GMs and they would say to you, how are your sales numbers looking? How are your numbers looking for the year? What do you reckon that tells someone? What's really important is sales numbers.
I remember, and I won't mention who it was, anyone looks at my LinkedIn profile, they know which bank I work for. But I remember there was a weekly meeting with the group CEO for all of wealth management about sales. Every executive had to attend. And I only remember because the amount of work that went into preparing those stupid report packs every week. So it was abundantly clear what the most important priority was to the whole organization because everyone knew about that meeting.
Yep. Yeah. And make no mistake, sales, like this is the point around mechanics and dynamics, right? It's not to say that sales are not important or kicking goals or they're critically important, right? But what's the balance, right?
Yeah.
So the 3 words, model, reward, and challenge. If you want to think about your culture, think about what behavior are you modeling? What are you rewarding? And what's not being challenged?
One of the big challenges we come up across in our work implementing technology change is we'll often go into a business and we'll talk to staff and they'll say, oh, look, we tried that 3 or 4 years ago. It got knocked on the head because it was too expensive. The business owner thought it was a bad idea. And they'll often say, so we just found a way around it. We just we built this manual thing or he or she doesn't know about that.
Yep.
And businesses almost lose that. It's almost like the team lose the confidence because they get rejected or declined once. They lose the confidence to try again. That to me feels like culture gone wrong. What can leaders do? Because I'll often play devil's advocate and I'll take that little bit of information and I'll do my bit and I'll go and say to the business owner, hey, your team was told me this. If I was in your shoes, I'd want to know that. And surprisingly, 9 times out of 10, the business owner acts just with complete shock. It says, gee, that doesn't sound like my team. I can't believe they've said that. How does that happen? Because these people literally operate under the same roof most of the time. Yet there's almost great idea just been left on the side of the road because no one thinks they can get it over the line.
Yep. Yep. Well, there's a bit in that, mate. So the first thing would be what behaviour is so if you're not hearing what you need to hear, there's a big question around what behaviour as a leader am I modelling? So, for example, if the only time I talk to my staff is when I'm asking about the numbers, or when I ring my people, is it only when do I only ring them when they've made a mistake or they haven't got something to me on time? When I have my weekly meeting with them, what am I talking about? Am I asking about how they're going? Am I just saying what clients have we got coming in? What's in the pipeline? Where are we at with this SOA? So if you think about, if you put all that in the mix and stir it up, if I'm an individual, what might I be hearing that I just kind of got to stay to my lane? I've just got to make sure that when my boss asks me, I know exactly where things are at, because that's the most important thing. When do we review? I mean, one of the big things in our observation being the difference between sport and corporate is how often sport review their performance, or how little corporate review their performance. So think about the Brisbane Lions. They'll play for a couple of hours on a Saturday, and they spend the rest of the time over the course of a week, a full-time job, preparing and reviewing. So if they play on a Saturday, there's 5 coaches who put together about, I don't know, it's 8 hours worth of video footage. So there's 40 hours worth of work already done on a Sunday, right, to review their performance. In corporate, when does your game start? Starts on 8 o'clock on a Monday and finishes, if you're lucky, 6 o'clock on a Friday. When, if ever, do you really, really stop and review how you're going about it, how you're doing things?
I think those reviews are often outcome-based reviews. How
Yeah,
am I
absolutely
tracking
they
against
are.
my numbers?
Yeah.
They're not necessarily my performance. They're just how am I tracking?
Yep.
And I think, you and I probably sat in teams before where there's been certain people who've been performing very well on the scoreboard, but there's probably been some other factors driving that performance that have nothing to do with their inputs.
Absolutely.
Let's call it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Steve Hansen, the All Blacks coach, saying, if I don't win games, am I a bad coach? All right. Or can I be a good coach and still lose? Can I be a bad coach and still win? Of course you can. So the other thing I'd be thinking about, so when do you create time? When do you carve out time to review the way we do things here? And it can be outcomes. Are we converting every lead we get? How many of them are converting to a client? Right. But also, what's the process that goes into it? Has anyone got any other ideas about how we might improve our onboarding system? Like the CEO of a wealth firm who rings Peter Warren and say, Warren, we need some help. Before that call happens, they could ask their people, what do you reckon we could do to improve efficiencies around here? You know what I mean? Like, it's just this flipping, one of the things we say is no one of us is smarter than all of us. Right. And we tell people, I don't care if you've been here one day or 100 years, if you see anything you see that will make me and our team better, you're obligated to tell us. You're obligated to say something. It's not nice to when you get asked. It's your job to tell us. So that's the other thing. When you join leading teams, it's made abundantly clear that if you see something that will make us better, you are obligated to tell us. That's what it means to wear the jersey. You don't have to do it, but also you don't have to work here. So there's a bit of pre-work you might go into that as well.
Yeah. Okay. And do you find that, because again, we just constantly in technology projects and change management stuff that we just find a bit of often disconnects in small businesses where I don't know whether teams almost feel like they're doomed from the start, but there's almost because things haven't worked in the past, let's call it.
Yeah,
there's
sure.
almost a preconceived vision that, things aren't going to work in the future.
Yeah.
What are some tips, I guess, for business owners who are really just driven to change the culture and want to improve things, but maybe just feeling that resistance that because they did try some stuff before and didn't work, that's fine. But they're still going to get that natural resistance from people in their business. What are some tips you've got to help overcome?
Yeah, good point. I mean, the first thing I would say is it's not going to get fixed overnight, right? So if as a leader rolls in and said, I just saw this, came back from this fantastic conference and heard this fantastic speaker and we're going to do things differently, you just want to make sure you have a sustained desire to do things differently or do things better, right? It's like a client, just giving them an SOA is not going to give them a good retirement, right? There's some stuff that has to happen in order to have a good retirement. It's a bit like high performance and culture. You've got to keep doing the work. The other thing to do is, when Chris Fagan got appointed, right, his first meeting with them, he invited us along. He spoke for 10 minutes, right? Brand new coach, brand new club, first ever AFL coaching gig, right? Imposter syndrome was flying out of him like anything. He spoke for 10 minutes and handed over to leading teams because he said, I want this to be a player-led club. So in his first opportunity, what did he do? He handed over and he let someone else do the talking, right? He could say, I want this to be a player-led club, so let me tell you how we're going to do things around here. And he could have had a 2-hour lecture at it, right? 10 minutes,
Yeah.
This is going to be a player-led club over to leading teams. And our job was to get it out of them. So to answer your question, mate, it would be sustained success. Also, get your people talking. Don't do this on your own. As a leader, you are entitled to set the business up the way you want to set it up. But also, you're probably not the font of all knowledge. Your people will know how to run this business pretty well. So ask them and create an environment where you can hear and they can really tell you what you need to hear, the unvarnished truth, as opposed to waiting for a consultant like Peter Warne to come in. And we tell Warney because we hope Warney's going to go to the boss.
Yeah, I think you're in real dire trouble if you do that, if that's your last resort. But I think,
Correct.
as you say, our team, no matter who you're dealing with, our consulting team anyway, like as you said, we want to come in and fix the mechanics. That's what we're really good at. No, I don't think any external consultant alone is ever going to fix culture. You need that recipe you've just spoken about, right?
You need the work.
Yeah.
You got to do the work. And the other thing I think about, right, if any sort of, you talked about a tech project that's going to have success, if you want total commitment around it, you need to make sure there's clear understanding, right? I want to understand why we're doing it, how it's going to work, how does it fit with my day job, how's it going to help clients, how's it going to align with my purpose? How do I get clear understanding? I've got to have an environment where it can have an open dialogue so I can ask questions, challenge, disagree, agree. How do you get to have an open dialogue? You got to have mutual trust and respect, right? So if I don't trust my leader, then am I really going to ask questions? Because if I ask questions, it might look like I'm wearing the black hat or I'm playing the devil's advocate. I'm doing that sort of thing. And he or she, it might just be, I want to get clear understanding, but it might mean that, Matt doesn't look like he's not committed. He's not behind this. So you've got, again, it comes back to earning the trust of your people so that they can tell you what you need to hear, when you need to hear it.
Yeah. I'd like to just finish on a couple of key questions that we get a lot, though I'd love to hear your perspective on. So we have definitely found, we almost describe them as our all Australian general managers. They're just people in advice businesses across Australia who just get shit done and just remarkable executors. Even if they're not the primary driver shareholder, they can just get shit done.
Got it.
And so there are probably often business owners will hit a juncture they work out that they're not great operators, that they're good advisors or business developers or whatever, but maybe they're not the best operators.
Yes.
What's the right way to go about making the decision? Firstly, do I need to hire someone in to help me run the business? And number two, what does that person look like? How do I go about that process? Because it's a pivotal decision to bring someone in from the outside to do it. Now, why is this important? Because a lot of people listening to this podcast are either going through a bit of M&A probably at the moment. The industry doing a lot of consolidation. And all the time we're hearing new CEOs being appointed to these businesses. Who are the people we should be hiring into these roles?
When you recruit, so just in general terms, when you recruit someone, you should be thinking about, am I recruiting for mechanics or dynamics, or am I ideally recruiting for both? Right. So you need to be, so this is, again, going under it, being clear about the culture you want or the culture you have. So culture is all about behaviors. So again, being crystal clear about, this is the expectations. If you want to wear this jersey, if you want to be part of this team, if you want to be the CEO / general manager, BDM, whatever role it is, this is the way we do things here. Right. So you got to be clear and you got to make a decision. Am I recruiting for someone who's a good cultural fit or someone who's, as you said, just really good at getting stuff done, or ideally both? And think about, there's a bit of a risk here, right? Because if let's say you spend 3 months or 6 months finding someone, you got to go through heaps of interviews, you pay headhunters fees, all that sort of thing, and you find someone and it turns out they don't fit. What's the best thing that can happen?
I reckon they move on pretty quick.
They leave, all right? So think about it. You've burnt
Yeah.
6 months. What's the worst thing that can happen if they don't fit? They stay.
They
And
stay
your
for
good
6
people
years.
leave because I'm not up for this. Right? Again, if we use a footy example, cast your mind back, I think it was back to 2006. Brisbane's players there was still Jonathan Brown and Simon Black. There was still a few premiership winning players running around, and the coach at the time felt like the premiership window was open, but we just needed a bit of a goal kicker. So we recruited someone up from the town of Melbourne, didn't play for Melbourne, played for another team, who was a really, really good goal kicker. And he came up and made quite a big impact on the environment without necessarily kicking as many goals as he could have. Right?
Yep.
So, but when you recruit someone, right, once they're in, you got to induct them well. And there's 2 parts to an induction. There's a formal induction. So formal induction is, this is the way we do things here. This is your H&S. This is your operating procedures, all that sort of mechanical stuff. It can be also told, like if you join learning teams, you get told about what our behaviours are. This is what we expect of you, right? That's the formal induction. The informal induction is when you go, think from a footy term, think about you go to your first training session or go to your first team meeting, right? So if you just recruited someone and you said, in this team, we have genuine conversations, we just say it, right? And they come to their first team meeting, and then after that meeting, there's the water cooler chat when what really goes on. So what do you reckon makes a bigger impact? What you get told in the interview or what you see in your first meeting? What you see in your first meeting, right? So when you're recruiting, you just need to make sure you're clear on who are we recruiting and why and what role they're going to play. And then once they're in, how are we inducting them to get the best out of them? So to your question about who and why and how and that sort of thing, I reckon you need to do a self-audit. So you need to be really crystal clear about my roles. But if you only ever self-assess, right, you're fighting with one arm hide behind your back, you should be getting feedback. You should ask your team. Now, whether you've built the environment where they're going to tell you what you need to hear, but if you truly, truly want to get better and you want to decide what role am I going to play in this business, self-assess, but also get feedback. All right. And then you start to get a feel for, well, what role do I really want to play and what role do I need to get filled in my business?
Yeah. Great tip. I must be doing something right. I get plenty of feedback for what I'm not good at.
Okay. But do you get feedback on the stuff you're doing well?
Probably not. I probably, no, I don't actually.
Why not?
Ask that question. I think it's not a very humble question to ask, and I've probably never really been. I don't know. I never wanted to know. I suppose, but maybe we should all ask that what we're doing well, because I'm very conscious of telling other people what they're doing really well. But yeah.
So remember the words reward and challenge, right? If you just tell, like, there is a system school of thought. If you only ever talk about the rewards, imagine if you only got a call from your leader when something goes wrong. Right? The challenge.
Yeah.
That wears pretty thin, right? But the reward is stuff that you should keep doing. I mean, it's humans, the reason you reward people is they're more likely to repeat that behavior. So if people say to you, Warnie, I love the fact you've got an open door policy and you're always there for when you need me, right? If they tell you that, do you reckon you're then going to close your door?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Probably not, right? So create an environment where you reward and challenge. Right? Telling people what they need to hear can also be, I love that you bring this to the team. I love the way you do this. Keep doing this, mate. Keep doing this. Even if you just phrase it as a keep. Like, it doesn't have to be overly humble. You can just say, what do I do that you think what really helps the team? I want to know.
Yeah.
Because then I can just keep doing it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of business owners, maybe that's a great tip for business owners who I know listen to this pod, who maybe don't know how to cart the conversation, how to kick the conversation off about what I should be doing less of.
Yep.
I'm not doing so well. Maybe that's a good way of inviting the feedback and say, hey, firstly, I need to know some stuff I'm doing well because I need a bit of confidence. But the condition of entry is that you've got to tell me some stuff I need to work on.
Yeah.
And something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. And more often I find like that there's artificial harmony is more present. So there's things I want to tell my leader, but I don't. Because most people don't roll out of bed saying, I can't wait to go to work and tell my boss all the stuff he or she should be doing better. It just doesn't happen. So, but if you create an environment where, what do I do that you love? I need to know because I want to make sure I keep doing it. And if you take that really well, if that lands and you operate and you continue to do it and you act on it, then it kind of opens up the door for A, feedback to go the other way, and B, maybe they'll then start telling you other things you could do differently. What do I do that you love? And what's one thing I could do to help the team? The other thing with feedback is you kind of want to scaffold it and make it easy on people. Because I remember there's one principal of a firm, she said, I always ask my people, how was that? How'd it go? Yeah, it went really well. It was good. They never tell me anything, Matt. I said, well, help them out. What's one thing that I did really well? What's one thing that I should do differently next time? So sometimes a bit of scaffolding can just help you, your people tell you what you need to hear.
I really like that. Last question, because this is a tech podcast. There's two key themes that are impacting small businesses with tech. One is remote work and distributed work. So that a lot of team communication now is on Teams or text or WhatsApp or Slack, and a lot of it's emojis and all over. So informal communication's changed a lot, and I think a lot of advice businesses are fully distributed, so we're not even on the same roof anymore. That's issue one. Number two is artificial intelligence and just how people are potentially not getting the same coaching, training. They're finding new ways of doing work. I guess from your perspective, what do you see as things that business owners and people in businesses need to be really conscious of about how they interact with technology and what its impact on culture could be?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is don't make excuses, right? A distributed workforce, I don't see them all the time. They're all really, really good excuses if you want. Financial planners understand this better than most. There are people in their life that trust them implicitly, and they see them twice a year. What are they called? Clients, right? Why is it that a client trusts an advisor and they only see him twice a year? It's because the advisor doesn't use the remoteness, the distribution, this interaction as an excuse. They invest the time to build a relationship and earn the trust of that client up front. So just do that with your teammates. Just do that with your people, right? I've had advisors tell me that they tell their clients stuff they don't tell their teammates. I'm saying, well, that's good. What do you reckon your team would be like if you could trust your teammates enough to say it? So first of all, don't use any of that distribution stuff as an excuse, because it can be an excuse if you choose it. Make the choice saying, I know we're distributed, but we are making an effort to continue to earn each other's trust and build a relationship with each other. And the other one is just be clear on, the other one I reckon with all this stuff is just being clear on the expectations we have of each other, right? What is remote or hybrid working? Is it okay to put the washing on at 11 o'clock or not? Right. And the other thing is, don't necessarily think you've got all the answers. I would encourage everyone to say, we've got this job to do. We've got these outcomes we want to achieve. How do you reckon we do it, people? And you're going to create an environment where people have a bit of ownership over that hybrid working situation as opposed to being told top down.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Great advice. Yeah, it does. I think there's so many technology choices open to people now. What we do find is when it's not discussed, people will just make their own decisions.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. But you can't hold them accountable for doing that.
Totally.
Because you haven't had the conversation.
Yeah. And feedback wherever possible shouldn't be a surprise. Right?
Yeah. Well, when we find out often in our discovery work that a certain staff member is using an AI tool that wasn't approved, well, it's like, well, what process did you have to? What time of the week do you discuss what everyone's using and doing? And is that a known expectation that they have to tell you about that? And often some kid is 23, just out of uni, doesn't know that they've got to let you know all that stuff. They're just used to fending for themselves. So how can you be surprised?
Yes, that's right.
Our response. Yeah. Matt, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think that's been a really useful conversation, because I always think I am one. Being a business owner is a really lonely sport. You talk about sport, it's a lonely sport being a business owner. Doesn't have to be lonely. There are a lot of good people in the industry out there helping business owners, and you're one of them for sure. How do people get in touch with you? How can they find out more about leading teams? What resources can you point us towards? Yeah,
good question. Websites, probably we've got articles, case studies, a whole heap of things on the website. So it's leadingteams.net.au. You can find me on there as well. There's about 25 of me around the country, just I'm the only one who spent 25 years in financial services in advice. If it's a particularly advice-related thing.
And knows how to pack a scrum in rugby. How many can pack a
Yes.
scrum, mate?
Lifting the line out, jump, yeah, that sort of thing. Yes. Yes. You being a front row and me being a lock, mate, we're probably closer than most geographically.
We used to refer to ourselves, we were the self-appointed engine room. There was five of us in the engine room. But there's an engine room in every business, and there's multiple engines in every business, I think, is the best way we think about it. But certainly I think, whilst I don't talk about it too often, I think sport was a very foundational experience for me in terms of how to be a leader, seeing how other people lead, how to coach.
Yep. How to be a good teammate as well, I find.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, I say that with my son, my eldest son, 8, like he's allowed to, any team sport he wants to do, he can do, because I just think you learn so much by being in a team and everything. And I think that's one of the best parts of work, is being in a team. And I certainly see all the data that tells me that most people's job satisfaction comes from the environment
team you're in.
very often. Yeah,
100%.
So, which is why you've obviously got such a great career. That's been really great. Great to reconnect with you as always.
Yes, mate.
I'll drop a link to Matt's details as well. Just, I'm sure LinkedIn's a good way to get in touch with Matt as well.
Yes.
And thanks everyone for listening. I'm sure next episode will be back onto AI or something more, technical.
Mechanics.
But I think it was a great sort of opportunity to talk about the people aspect of what we do in technology change management. And I'm sure if you talk to anyone in the Finura team, they will tell you that without great leadership, no technology change ever happens. Thanks everyone for listening.